So, I'm just going to introduce myself because I know you know who I am, but just for the purposes of this. So, I'm a paediatrician, I'm Helena Clements, and I have been a consultant paediatrician for 19 years and a paediatrician altogether for 30 years. And we've just been talking about the very complex children that I look after and spend my day job thinking about. But the reason I want to talk to you about climate change is because actually as a children's doctor and a mother and a grandmother, it has really become very foremost in my mind to think about their futures and the future of the children I look after. And as a doctor and a paediatrician, I think it's my duty to think about my role as a paediatrician and a doctor to advocate for children's health. And I think about that in two ways. So I fix children at the moment, or I try to fix them, but actually I think a lot about prevention and keeping children healthy in the first place, and that's about their physical health and their mental health. But actually, when I'm thinking about the future, I'm thinking about climate change and the impact of climate change on health. So earlier this year I went down with Extinction Rebellion to join the Health March, and there are about 300 doctors there, which was really empowering to really talk about the health of our patients and actually the impact of climate change on our patients. And one of the things we did was we took off our shoes and had them all lined up in Trafalgar Square, and there were 110 pairs of shoes because we were talking about the number of deaths every week from respiratory disease caused by air pollution. So those are things that happen in this country, but of course if you think about it globally, the death and health toll of climate change is absolutely massive. So, you know, we think about drought and crop failures in the southern hemisphere. Actually that leads to hunger and death and people on the move, refugees, and I think that has a massive impact on everybody's health and their mental health too. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and I can, as I say, I can fix children, but I need to be thinking about giving them hope for the future. And so I suppose I really wanted to ask you guys what you thought about that, and whether you've thought about it as young people who are going to be our future doctors, our future parents, and you know, you're going to be around for a long time. So is that something that you've thought about? Thought about what you might do? Yeah. Yeah? Anybody had thought of any actions that you can do as an individual?
I suppose publicising the urgency of the problem,
yeah.
Get people thinking more about what they can do.
Yeah.
As a doctor, you're on the front. You sort of your interaction with the public is so very personal with patients that to get your message across, especially for respiratory conditions, is more important.
Yeah. So I think what you're describing there is quite a lot of personal power as doctors, because we have that credibility, and we you know, as we're acting in our duty as doctors to link the environment with people's direct health problems. I think that's really important. Anybody else have any thoughts about how they might tackle climate change?
Just increasing awareness and people know what's actually happening to Earth and how they can do their bit personally, like a personal level.
Yeah. Have any of you made any personal changes to try and reduce your carbon impact? Have you thought about that as individuals?
Like really small things like recycle more, or just use less. For example, plastic bags.
Yeah, yeah. So reduce and recycle is really, really important. What do you think, so?
Like, for example, like just car sharing as well.
Yeah.
To reduce CO2 emissions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm guessing as medical students, you feel quite poor. You know, I'm sure you've got big debts, you haven't got big income, disposable income, and it's quite hard to feel powerful. Whereas as a senior consultant, of course, I'm, relatively speaking, I consider myself to be rich. You know, I work hard, I have a large income, and so I'm in a position now to really think about what that means, what it means to be rich, and what that means in terms of carbon. So I think, you know, the way I think about climate change now is what I can do as an individual, what I can do as a doctor, and then what else do we need to do? So there's sort of 3 levels of interaction. And so as an individual, as a rich individual, I have an electric car. I'm very lucky to live in an eco house, which it wasn't expensive to build, it would be expensive to buy now, but actually it has very low bills because it doesn't need any heating, and so that's happens to be a lifestyle choice that I've made. I grow my own food, which reduces carbon. We have a small holding and I have a flock of sheep, so I eat meat, but I eat a lot less meat and a lot less dairy than I used to because I'm much more conscious of that carbon impact. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to know what an eco house was.
An eco house. So an eco house is basically it's a house that is highly insulated, has no heating, makes its own energy. So we've got solar panels and things like that. So that it is a zero carbon house. Now, obviously, that isn't something that is going to be available to most people. But actually, insulation. You know, my daughter, who's a student, when she moved into her last house, went into the loft and looked at how thick the insulation was. She got into all sorts of trouble with her landlord, but you know, she was thinking about that. She's lived in an eco house all her life. So those are things that I can do as an individual. And the other thing that I can do as an individual is think about money, and that's really interesting. It's interesting because we don't think about our money very much, and I'm sure if you're thinking about it, you haven't got enough. But actually, when you become doctors, eventually you'll start to have a significant income. And where that money goes actually makes an impact. So my money has been in NatWest forever because there was NatWest at Queen's Medical Centre. So that's where I joined. But actually, I'm now really thinking about what bank I should have my money in because some of the banks, including NatWest, invest in oil and coal and gas, and actually that's not where I want my money to be. I want it to be where investing in renewables and sustainable development. So my husband and I are moving on money, and we're a lot of doctors and the colleges, Royal Colleges, are thinking about where the pensions are and stuff like that, because where our money is controls where development goes or doesn't go. So money is another thing, and of course the other thing is travel. And that's a really tricky one because when I was your age, I did quite a lot of travelling, but I very rarely fly now. I wouldn't like to say I never fly, but I haven't flown for 5 years, and that's a personal choice. So now I would use the train. We try and holiday in this country if we can, and we think very carefully about our carbon footprint from that. So they're all things that we can do as individuals. The other thing that I've been doing a lot of recently is talking about climate change to people. So I started doing this maybe 6 months ago, and so I talk to every lot of students. I've got a book here called There's No Planet B, which I don't know whether any of you have seen before. It's written by Mike Berners-Lee, who's the brother of Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the internet, so clever family. And this book describes our lives in terms of carbon. So you can compare how much carbon it costs to create this much protein via a cow versus this much protein by beans and soy or whatever. But it also talks about travel and money and all of the other things that we can do in our life. So I have given a lot of copies of this book away, and I can give you copies if you like. And it's called A Handbook for the Make or Break Years, which is exactly what it is. So I talk about this book and I talk about climate change. So I went down to the Extinction Rebellion March for Health, and just recently I've been at a conference for medical managers, and nobody's talking about the health impacts of climate change at a very senior level. And you think, well, why not? Why aren't we talking about this? Because, in 10 or 20 years' time, the impact of climate change is going to be absolutely massive. Even if we do something now, we're not doing enough. And I talked about my train talk, so I've been talking to people on trains, standing up and saying, my name is Clements, I'm a children's doctor, and I want to talk about climate change. And that has been tweeted and retweeted many thousands of times, because we need to get that out there. And because I'm a doctor, and because you're doctors, we have that sort of moral authority to be able to talk about it in terms of our patients. So this isn't about me because I'll be dead, but it is about my grandson. It is about you because you're young. And as doctors, it's about our patients, and so I just feel really passionate about that. So I don't know how that makes you feel, whether you think she's completely bonkers, which maybe is true, or whether you feel that you get that and that you think it is your job to start thinking about that. What do you think? Yeah.
I think it's really difficult because as a mass of people, as the UK, we can make little changes in our lives which have small impacts on the environment, and eventually will hopefully have a domino effect to solving the issue. But when a government's going to get largely involved, I think a lot of influence lies with them. When a lot of the Amazon is being burned by the Brazilian government and it's being allowed to do that. And on the flip side, when you see Germany, which is pretty much all renewable energy now, Sweden, which has issue with, they don't have any rubbish anymore. They use it all. They're so sustainable that they don't have any rubbish. When a government's going to get involved, and
so we've got a general election in 3 weeks. So I hope you're all going to vote and think about very carefully about what we vote for. You're absolutely right. And so when you get your, when I do a train talk, or we Extinction Rebellion are talking to a lot of people, is to put pressure on government, because you're absolutely right. We can do our individual bits. And actually that groundswell of this is really going to change. And people like David Attenborough are really getting people engaged with that. But we have to get governments to act. But actually we've got an opportunity in 3 or 4 weeks' time to say, we want our government to do this. And so when I went to a conference of senior medical leaders, there was no talk about climate change. But I went and spoke to the leader and said, why aren't we talking about it? And it's now on the agenda for next year. Now, next year is too long away. We need to be talking about it now. But you're absolutely right. But we can all make a difference. And by talking about it and talking to our friends and our families, the people will, we can make government act. Because they need our votes. The reason I was late today was because we had a politician here wanting to get my vote, So my vote will depend on who's actually talking properly about climate action, because, I need you guys to have hope, I need me to have hope, and our governments have to work across nations to create that. So yeah, absolutely. And that's those 3 levels, so it's personal, it's where we work, so everything we do in here, in this hospital, we need to be thinking about. And we were doing today, we were talking about waste management and plastics and renewable, recycling stuff, energy. But we've all got things that we can do at all those levels. And when you get to be a senior doctor like myself, I've got quite a loud voice and I'm using it because I think it's so important. And you may feel like you're poor, you haven't got so many choices available to you, you haven't got loud voices, but very quickly you will have, and what I would commend to you is to use them. Greta Thunberg, who, is a child, is a young person who has Asperger's, she certainly had a voice and has been heard. And, not everybody likes what she's saying, but actually she's being heard, and that's the start. So thank you for listening to me today. Thank you for letting me do that. And if you'd like a copy of There Is No Planet B, I will mention. I've probably given about 300 copies of this to people. It's so important. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.